All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is 10 a.m., so thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar for Invasive Species Awareness Week. Today, we're going to be talking about the Japanese beetle. But before that, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping tips. Please put any questions for the speakers into the Q&A box. So at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, you're going to see a little Q&A icon, and that's where all questions go for the speaker. The chat is enabled. You are able to chat with the host and the panelists, but we really ask that you use that only for technical difficulties. The webinar is being recorded, and we are going to be sharing the recording at the end of the week. We will be uploading it to our YouTube account, so stay tuned for that. This webinar has been approved for one pesticide recertification credit from the Washington State Department of Agriculture. We're going to be presenting a code word at some point during the webinar and instructions on how to get that credit, so pay attention. And if you lose connection to the webinar, you're just going to use the exact same link to log back in. And worst case scenario, there is a phone number, so you can call the phone number that's on your Zoom invitation, and you can at least get the audio that way. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to just briefly touch upon what the Washington Invasive Species Council is. So we were established by the state legislature in 2006. And we were extended until June 30th of 2032. And what the council does is we provide policy level direction, planning, and coordination to all entities statewide that have some role to play in invasive species. And we like to kind of compare ourselves to a compass. So we bring everyone together and then just kind of point people in the right direction as far as ways that they can collaborate and coordinate for invasive species management. There are 3 staff of the Washington Invasive Species Council. Stephanie Helms is the executive coordinator. She unfortunately does not have power. We had a terrible windstorm here in Western Washington, and fortunately she is without power, but she sends her wishes. There's me, there's the community outreach and education specialist, and Jessica LaBelle is our invasive species program specialist. And the members of the council include state, federal, local agencies, as well as tribal nations, non-government organizations, industry groups, and universities. So thank you for joining us again. Welcome to Invasive Species Awareness Week. The new governor, Bob Ferguson, has declared this week in solidarity with the national event that's taking place. And there are events throughout the entire country that's really aiming this week to raise awareness of invasive species, and especially the role that the public plays, because we really need your help to address this problem. Everyone has a very simple role to play, and you can take actions in everyday life to help prevent the spread of invasive species. So thank you again for joining us. And today, like I said, we're going to be learning about the Japanese beetle. And with that, I will hand it over to Cassie Chihorse. Cassie is with the Washington State Department of Agriculture's pest program, and she is going to kick it off.
Thanks, Maria. Give me 1 second while I share my screen. You will see my PowerPoint slides, but I will quickly make them look nice for you.
Oh, they do look nice.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera while I talk. I'll try to remember to turn it on for questions at the end. But like Maria said, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to celebrate and kick off Invasive Species Awareness Week, or continue the momentum of it, and learn more about Japanese beetle. So with us today, we actually have Camilo Acosta. He's on with us. He's our Japanese beetle eradication coordinator. He'll be able to answer and field us questions at the end. So if you have them throughout, go ahead and post them in the chat box. My name is Cassie. I was introduced. I'm the outreach specialist at WSDA, so kind of along the same lines of Maria does, but for a different agency. Us here at WSDA, you have to think about the agency is regulating, advocating, and providing services for the state's agricultural industry. So if you think about growing and feeding, you have to think about different components, and that includes pests. Which brings us to the pest program. And behind the pest program, you will find a group of these dedicated individuals who are working to protect our farms, our fields, and our landscapes from invasive species and living organisms that could eat it. And for most, it's really more than just a job. It's a career that they really have a passion for, and you can really see it through their work. Uh-oh, I'm frozen. Okay, so inside the PEST program, you'll find a group of entomologists who have a lifetime of field collection and identification in and out of the office. You'll find scientists who take plant and insect samples and bring them back to the lab for diagnostics and analysis. You'll find biologists doing the education and outreach, meeting with people in the community. You will find people doing backbreaking labor, removing invasive species, scientists doing cutting innovative research, and other people working into eradication. So when something invasive comes over, at the pest program, we typically work to eradicate it, which is a fancy word for complete removal. And when I tell you we are here to eradicate a new pest, typically I'm looked at like I'm crazy. But I really want to highlight that the program is in 51 years now of continually eradicating spongy moth as needed. So this is an invasive pest that is continually introduced, and the program works year after year from continuing to keep it from establishing. So last year we highlighted that we've been having success for over 50 years. And we prevent this caterpillar from growing in our environment because what it does is it creates severe defoliation. So this picture I show of you here on the right is defoliation this caterpillar from the spongy moth can cause, happens in the East Coast. So for 50 years now, we have been working to protect our forests through this eradication program as needed. Another success story I'd like to highlight that's a little bit newer and closer to home is the story of the northern giant hornet, or you might know it as Asian giant hornet or murder hornet. We successfully declared it eradicated at the end of last year. Hornets was first discovered in December 2019 by a resident of the public. Since that time, WSCA worked really hard with residents as well as creating their own eradication program to successfully remove any populations. So we have two successful eradications, and now I'm here to tell you the story of Japanese beetle, right? And how we started and where we're at, and really teach you how you can help us work towards having it completely removed or towards an eradication. So Japanese beetle, throughout its lifetime, it comes in different shapes and sizes. It comes in different forms, right? And it has different stages. So knowing what to look for when or what we do when will help you understand the program and get us closer to that removal point. Right now, we're in winter. So Japanese beetle is living as a grub or a larva in the soil. Now, a lot of grubs look alike, so you typically have to get Japanese beetle grubs underneath a microscope to tell exactly if it's that. But if you do find some grubs, you're going to look for a white C-shaped grub, anywhere from an eighth to an inch long, and it will have kind of a brown tan head and visible legs. These are easiest to kind of dig up in the spring, but they can be out in the soil throughout the fall. And then in the winter, they just dig themselves down. They really like to eat grass roots. So if you think about your front yard, you think about your backyard, your church, your school, maybe a park that you play at, This is just a giant grass buffet for these grubs. A golf course is a great place as well, and they will eat the grass roots. So you see my yellow patches in this lawn. Japanese beetle grubs were feasting on the lawn. It wasn't able to take up water, and then we have brown patches. So in the spring, no matter how much I water my lawn or how much the rain comes down, it just won't turn green. And then if I have a bunch of yummy grubs, I invite other rodents, critters, etc. to come in and they tear that up even further. Now, there are some other things that can cause this destruction that you see, but if you're living in an area with Japanese beetle, it could possibly be that. As it starts to get warmer and we get closer to the summer, we can start to look for these adults. And that's pretty much when we're going to notice them because they are out and about. They can pop up anywhere from May through October, but we'll really start to notice them in July and once it starts to get a little bit warmer. So you're going to look for a bug that's about the size of your pinky nail. People will typically say it looks like a ladybug, but it's definitely colored different. It has a green metallic head and copper covered wing covers. Couple of tidbits of hair on the patch and the sides of its abdomen. But typically, what you will see is the destruction that the Japanese beetle will cause. It loves flowers, it loves roses, and it can be up in our tree canopies and in our lawn eating as well. We do have a couple things that are commonly misreported or that can look like Japanese beetle until we get a closer eye. Here's a picture of some milkweed beetle that was seen crawling up just like Japanese beetle and other invasive things can, but you notice the difference in color. Another common one is a little bear beetle. It has the same coloring, but it's covered in quite a bit more hair. And lastly, the one I'll show you is the Klamath weed beetle or St. John's wort's beetle. Now, we do have a full list of lookalikes on our website, so you can go on it and click the Beetle 101 tab to read through the description as Japanese beetle and find more descriptions of the common imposters. But what you will typically see is the skeletonization that the beetles will cause. So on this leaf, you can see that they've been eating it, chewing holes and skeletonizing it eventually down to where there won't be anything. They also will do this to flowers. Now, Japanese beetle really doesn't discriminate what it eats because it feeds on over 300 different types of plants. Ornamental vegetations, things that we grow and use and consume, Japanese beetle will thrive on because it is invasive. So here is your list for all of you that like to read and look through the common list of host plants for Japanese beetle. Through its life cycle before it gets to this adult phase where it's really wreaking havoc on some things that we're growing, it will be living in the soil, remember, as that grubber larva. And they're actually really mobile. They move themselves around throughout the spring to find those grass roots before they pupate. We reach those warmer months where it will hatch into the adult that will be above the surface. It will be eating, mating, digging down to drop a couple eggs, coming back up, eating, mating, digging down to drop a couple eggs, and that cycle will continue. Then we get into the fall where those adults have died, but those eggs will have hatched into the grubs. They'll move around and eat some more, and then that cycle will repeat itself. So it's really important for you to understand how Japanese beetle and where it lives when to understand how we help spread it. If I have some soil and I dig that soil up, it could have Japanese beetle eggs or larvae in it. And then if I move that soil, I could be transporting Japanese beetle to new places. Kind of the same thing. You see that potted plant in that picture. Let's say I have a plant sitting on my front porch, Japanese beetles drop some eggs in it, and then I move. Well, later on, I could hatch out some new Japanese beetles and be spreading it. Then we flip over to the summer where we have flowers, we're cutting them, trimming our trees, mowing our lawn. We could be mowing up and moving Japanese beetle, right? So Japanese beetle is a really good hitchhiker because we help spread it. Now, it can also fly. But if we think about Japanese beetle, it's a scarab beetle native to Japan. It was actually first discovered in Riverton, New Jersey, about 1916. Okay, so here's my East Coast. Japanese beetle is now there. It is considered established. Since then, Japanese beetle slowly started to spread across the United States. States are looking for it and they are not finding it. And states are looking for it and they are finding it. If they find it, they work to eradicate it. So, to support this, in Washington, we started looking for Japanese beetle in the late 80s. Now, if I look at this map, you can see the East Coast is purple. That shows Japanese beetle is there. But I know I don't have it over here, as I reach further west. So, my question to you is, how is it getting here? It can't fly itself that far. We do know that we just discovered that we help transport it, but it also transports on that trains, planes, and automobiles in addition to that soil, compost, and fill that it hitchhikes in. It is actually known to travel on airplanes. So you see this image here, there is a giant net. This plane was likely coming from a place infested with Japanese beetle. They didn't want any beetles to be able to fly out if there were any detected before that was able to be removed and treated so that there wasn't any flyouts and it being introduced to new places. If you think about this picture and we think about where we could have caught Japanese beetle in Washington State, you might think of some major airports or SeaTac. So in 2019, as well as years past, it has been a beetle picked up at the airport occasionally. Then the airport has treated, we've worked with them to make sure that properties are free and clear of beetles trapping in the area, and typically never been a problem, right? We've never really found beetles outside of that area. However, in 2020, in the following year, we caught beetles at the airport as typical, and then we caught beetles in Yakima County in Sunnyside, Washington, and later in Grandview City out in Yakima County. So this isn't typical of those airport catches that are removed, treated, and then no populations present, right? Over here, down in central Washington, that's not typical. So what WSTA did is we met in November of 2020 that year, and we decided to start surveying through the area and getting to doing some education and outreach and figuring out what the extent of that problem could be. And actually, during Invasive Species Week in 2021, we chose to highlight Japanese beetle. And because we highlighted this in social media, you all were paying attention, we actually received this picture and a report from a resident in that Grandview area saying, you know what? I noticed these on my plants last year. And they actually went through to tell us a story that they picked all of these beetles off and dropped them in a cup. And then they went on a walk through their neighborhood to see the beetles eating and destructing many other plants. And this came to realize us that, we're going to have a problem that we need to work on. We continue to do the outreach in the area as well as we continue today to really educate and teach residents how they can help. We haven't really stopped since. We go to local events in local communities, but we also started trapping to see, where and how far has this program gone. So I'll show you some new and updated maps to show you where it's spread since that original finding in Yakima County, but I'll really tell you what we're doing now. So we're working on that eradication program, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it's not going to be done in 1 year. I mentioned that this started in 2020. We're actually going to continue multi-year efforts to remove Japanese beetle through the process of trapping for it, treating for it, and imposing a quarantine. Yay. Now, trapping for the beetle helps us learn where it is, as well as helps remove beetles from the area. Japanese beetle traps come in different sizes and shapes. They can be bought and found at local home and garden stores as well as online. This is typically the first line of defense used to determine if Japanese beetle is present. It has a pheromone lure at the top that smells like other beetles or roses, and basically they're attracted to it. They'll eat along the way before they get caught in that bag, and they just perish and die. This picture, this Japanese beetle trap I have for you is taken from an area where Japanese beetle was found. This trap was set out, and about an hour later, it was full of beetles. So this is definitely something that we could be seeing if we don't stop Japanese beetle, is all of our houses full of bags of beetle traps. Okay. Here's where we set beetle traps last year. Here's my map of Washington. We set them all across the state, so any black dot you see is where we've set traps. And I'll show you where we caught Japanese beetles. So you'll see over there in SeaTac, we caught beetles around the airport again. Unlike other years, we did catch some additional beetles, so we will be working in that area towards an eradication as well. And then we've caught beetles again near Grandview, Sunnyside, and in some expanded areas. In addition to trapping for the beetles, we actually go in and we treat. We hire a licensed contractor. We enter properties and apply an insecticide to treat for those grubs. So this year, we will be working with in King County around SeaTac with the appropriate agencies as necessary to treat for those Japanese beetles. However, we really want to get landowner involvement in that lower Yakima Valley, into the Tri-Cities, into that eastern Washington, and I'll show you exactly where. So we've been catching Japanese beetles over in and around the city of Wapato. In that original area of Grandview, Sunnyside, now expanded into deeper into Sunnyside, Mabton, getting closer into Prosser. And as of this year and last year, we're actually working on removing Japanese beetles from Pasco. So if you get into your car in Yakima and you take a ride down into the Tri-Cities, you may run into Japanese beetle. Now, it's also important for us as we're working and traveling into these into these areas to be aware of Japanese beetle, but to also be taking close attention, especially if we're in one of these areas, to sign up for a Japanese beetle treatment. So again, the areas of Wapato, Sunnyside, Grandview, Mapton, and Pasco, residents in this area should be signing up for treatment. Now, how Japanese beetle treatment works, whether you're in Oregon, Idaho, or a different city, the treatment is applied, right? And let's say you treat at your house for Japanese beetle and your neighbor treats at your house for Japanese beetle. Well, if someone doesn't treat at their house for Japanese beetle, they have the chance to breed and grow Japanese beetle, and Japanese beetle doesn't discriminate, so eventually it would come back to the properties that were treated. That's why we're coming in multiple years trying to work with landowners in those areas and get them to sign up for treatments. We actually send letters to residents in the area asking them to fill out a form and pop it in the mail. They can even go online to sign up for treatments and click the button. The treatment form requires a PIN so that we know that you're signing up for only your treatment. However, if you're in the area and you've lost your PIN and haven't signed up for treatment, you can give us a phone call or send us an email and we will get that to you. Now, a little bit about the stuff that we're applying. It's actually a low-risk insecticide, and we are using a licensed contractor. By using a licensed contractor, we are kind of limiting people from handling this on their own. So people are not going to the store and buying basically whatever they would find off the shelves and then hitting their trees with that. Now, this could harm other beneficial insects and other things that we're not targeting. Whereas we're using a low-risk insecticide and applying it to lawns so that we are treating for those Japanese beetle grubs. Now, if you talk to anybody who's lived in an area where Japanese beetle once was, or sorry, where Japanese beetle is, maybe some friends over on the East Coast, they'll tell you that it would get bad. People would go out and they would just spray and treat, and everything would die. So by us coming in and applying these free treatments at no cost to the landowner, we're also working towards eradication. We're using a low-risk insecticide. It's one of our prongs towards eradication. So we use that trapping, we use that treatment, and then we also have quarantine. Quarantine affects people moving things in the area, people growing things in the area, and working in the area. Basically, when you look at this map here, pay attention to that orange line. That's going to be a quarantine boundary. Now, I set traps all throughout the county so I can say this is the area where Japanese beetle are. Inside of that boundary is where Japanese beetle is living and eating. Now, if I take something like, let's say I'm cutting my trees and I move that outside of the boundary, or I have flowers that Japanese beetle is living on and eating in, and I move it outside of the boundary, or I dig up some soil and move it outside, I am now spreading Japanese beetle to new areas. So what this quarantine says is it's basically a rule that takes certain items and kind of restricts their movement, right? Because we don't want to spread Japanese beetle to new areas. We want to be able to be treating areas with Japanese beetle and kind of preventing it from spreading. So what we've done is we've actually created drop-offs for landowners to bring their yard waste to in this area. And we also work with farmers and growers and different business operators in the area to create compliance agreements, basically work with them behind the scenes to help them mitigate those risks of moving Japanese beetle. So this is currently the only quarantine area that we have where we're working to prohibit and not prohibit, but reduce the risk of spreading Japanese beetle. It's just one of those other three tools that we use when we're working towards eradication. So again, like I said, it's going to be multiple years of us using trapping, treating, and potentially quarantine to help us remove Japanese beetles, help us prevent them from spreading, and really teach people how they can help and get involved. One thing that's really important for you to take away is seeing and looking at this quarantine. Think about the United States, okay? There is actually this U.S. domestic Japanese beetle harmonization plan. And it's this 43-page federal document, and it dictates and tells states what they can and cannot do or how they should act if they have Japanese beetle. I showed you this map earlier, so we know which states have Japanese beetle and which states don't. And I have this guide telling me what to do. So think about it on a much larger level. I have a Japanese beetle quarantine in Washington, but I know Japanese beetle is in the United States, and states in the East Coast basically have to apply to certain rules and regulations and do things before they can move their goods so they're not spreading and giving us Japanese beetle, right? This costs people more time, it costs people more money, and it might make goods harder to use or harder to transport. So think about us here up in Washington State. Right now, we are working on removing Japanese beetle. However, if we don't successfully move forward and Japanese beetle is here to stay, we might be lumped into the category of those states over in the Eastern United States. And we have that federal guidebook that will tell us what we have to do then. So in the terms of quarantine, there's one currently inside Washington State, but if we don't work together and continue to work towards eradicating Japanese beetle, that quarantine could grow and encompass our state. Then other states and even Canada might look at us and say, you'd better do your job better before I take your goods. So it could cost landowners, it could cost growers extra additional money. The other thing that I want you to think of as a person and a resident living in Washington State is the effects that Japanese beetle could cause to you. right? Most of us have lawn outside of our house. So we have these giant grass buffets that Japanese beetle could get into and could drop some eggs and grubs could be growing. It's really important to you as a community to uphold your parks and to uphold that great green vibe that you guys have going around. So Japanese beetle could affect us in the terms of some of our exports. It could hit you very close to home, and it could affect things that you grow and harvest in your garden. Oops. So I really want you to think of some of the direct impacts a Japanese beetle infestation could have to you, whether that's walking in outside and seeing your favorite tree leaves decimated by Japanese beetle, walking into Japanese beetle flying around your head, or maybe it impacting someone that you know or impacting just their general economy in Washington. The last thing that I'm going to leave for you here is really how you can help and how to stay connected with the Japanese beetle program. Sorry, I'm having a couple freezes on some slides here. All right. Okay. I think you're seeing a slide here. So one of the things, the best thing that you can do is you can stay connected. And I really encourage you at this point in time of the webinar, whether you're on your computer or your mobile devices, I really want you to open up another browser and I want you to type in this website. Okay, you can actually even scan the QR code at the bottom of this screen and it will take you to the website. agr.wa.gov/beetles. Please type this into your browser and I want you to scroll all the way down on that homepage to this interactive map. You can type in your address into this interactive map to see if you are in a Japanese beetle quarantine, to see if you're in a Japanese beetle treatment area, and to see if you are near a Japanese beetle detection. The other thing that's really important for you to do from this webpage is to stay informed, right? We are our best resources. You can work to educate your neighbor. You can work to educate your community, maybe a group you're involved with or your coworkers. The best way to do this is to stay informed and sign up for updates. So on that homepage, I want you to click the blue link that says sign up for updates. I create beetle blasts that I will send out to your email monthly or bi-monthly, depending on what's going on with the program. And if you're into social media, join our Facebook group. We run and monitor it. It's a great way to connect with others as well as get the best of our program updates. The last thing that you should do is if you happen to think you suspect to see a Japanese beetle, it's very important that you take a picture. Okay, take a picture and submit it to us. Whether you think it's maybe is or maybe not, that will help us determine what we need to do. You can upload that picture to us online. You can send that picture in an email. Or you can even call our hotline and give us the report. We actually man our hotline. We have admin that are at it during our normal work hours, so someone will definitely get back in contact with you. Now that is all that I really have to share with you, kind of the history of how we started and where we're at. I have seen some questions come in through the chat box. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Maria, who's going to kind of run us through how we will handle doing that.
Great. Thank you so much, Cassie. Yeah, there are questions coming in. If you have questions for Cassie, please put them into the Q&A. We will get to the questions in the chat, but we're going to do the Q&A first. So please put your questions there. And Cassie and Camilla, I'm just going to read them to you, and you're both welcome to unmute yourselves and answer them, and we'll just move through them as they come in.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
right.
Maria, if you don't mind, before we
Yeah.
kind of get into this questions, I'm gonna actually steal the computer back, and give a little basics on kind of the eradication. I saw some questions about treatment. So if you're looking at my screen, I've gone to our website, agr.wa.gov/beetles. I just harped on you about it a lot, but whether you're on your phone, it'll be a drop down up here at the top. I think you can see my mouse. Let me annotate it. Right.
Yes, we
Or if
can see
you're
your
on
mouse.
a computer, you will see this tab. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. What you're going to want to do is you are going to want to click on this treatment tab right here. And this treatment tab will actually give you all the information that you need to know about 2025 Japanese beetle treatments, including a webinar we hosted about what residents need to know, how to sign up, where you can go to sign up, maps of those planned treatment areas, that interactive map, as well as some of the most common facts and questions that people typically have. So again, this is a great resource for you. But of course, we're going to go ahead and answer your questions right now, and not make you wait. So I'll go ahead and pass it back. Camilo, I'll read the first question off if you want to go ahead and answer it. What is the active ingredient in the insecticide that we are using?
Yeah, the active ingredient in acelepryn is called chlorantraniliprole, and I have also typed it in the chat for anyone that's curious, as that's probably more useful than me
Camilo,
saying
if you're
that.
talking, I'm not hearing you.
I am able to hear him. Oh, she might have lost our audio.
So, Maria, you
Can
can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Look, someone said they can hear me as well.
Looks like
Yeah.
he's having a little bit of trouble with this. Oh,
Cassie, she might be having audio problems. Yeah, we can hear her. Um, okay. In the meantime, we are going to go through some questions in the
okay.
Q&A. Camille, if you're able to answer them, great. If not, oh, good. Cassie's back. Okay. Okay. All right, we're gonna
Yeah,
start in the Q&A box. Does that sound all right? Okay. First
cool.
question. Why is the beetle still named Japanese? I understand the Entomological Society of America's Better Common Names Project sought comment in 2024, but I lost track of the timeline for removing and replacing the ethnically charged name.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Thanks for the question. Um, I do, I know exactly what you're talking about. I believe it was late March or late February or March of last year when the ESA sought comment for the Better Common Name project regarding Japanese beetle. I don't have any updates on that process through ESA. I do know that there is a email list that you can sign up for on their website, but I don't have any further information about that renaming process at this time. But I do appreciate the question.
Thank you. Is there a best time of day to look for the Japanese beetle?
Yeah, Richard. In in Grandview especially, you can find them pretty much at all times of day. There's places where you can uh, you can just walk down the street and they will be buzzing around you and landing on you. Um, but specifically, if you're trying to actually remove them um, from plants that you're growing or plants in your garden, probably the best time to look for them is early in the morning when they're less mobile and they'll actually be trying to hide kind of tucked in between the petals and flowers, and they won't be as mobile early in the morning just due to the temperature. And that's probably the best time if you're actually trying to physically remove them from your plants. If you're trying to drown them in soapy water or something like that, that's the best time to see them. Other than that, they are usually the most active, and it really coincides with the day and temperature cycle. So during our field season, and when you're hanging up traps in the middle of the day, between noon and 4 p.m., you're going to find beetles, buzzing around and flying and feeding. So that's when they're most active. But like I mentioned, for us to actually be able to find them and see them early in the morning is definitely your best bet.
Thank you. Okay, next one has three parts. So Japanese beetle mainly found on turf grass and home yard. What about the golf course? And are there Japanese beetles found on grape?
Yeah, so I see Ping has three questions total. I'll go through each one here. Um,
Thank you.
so Japanese beetle, they will drop down straight into the turf grass to lay those eggs, and that process isn't. It's probably not the best way to actually see them in action. Um, the question where they mainly found, they will divide their time between eating and dropping down to lay the females dropping down to lay eggs, but the best way to really see them and where I would say they're mainly found would be on their host plants. And like we've mentioned, there's a long list of host plants, but I know a lot of people in Grandview, for example, have roses, and they actually have a proper rose garden there in Grandview as well. So when I need to see adults alive, um, that rose garden, for example, is where I would head and where I head because they are there in great numbers. Um, but yes, I guess you could, run into a Japanese beetle coming up out of the turf grass or a female dropping down to burrow into the soil. That is definitely possible. But the main place they would be found, I would think, during the day is on their host plants. And yes, exactly like Cassie mentioned, golf courses are prime habitat for Japanese beetle. That nice manicured, soft soil that's constantly watered, because they keep the that grass really green and nice for use in the sport. So that's perfect habitat for Japanese beetle. And then of course sometimes they also have those some ornamentals planted around that can provide food for the adults. So yeah, definitely a prime location to find Japanese beetle. And yes, grapes are one of the uh, host plants for Japanese beetle, one that we're most concerned about, especially in our area. And I have one place I've physically seen Japanese beetle on grapevine are actually a report we got 3 years ago now in Wapato, and that was actually the first instance where we saw a Japanese beetle in Wapato was from a home uh, vineyard, and that resident reported it to us, and I saw them on his grapes. So yeah, definitely a concern for the grape industry there. And
Oh,
finally, I think you have a question on European chafer, usually found with European chafer. Yeah, definitely aware of European chafer. Definitely aware of it in Seattle, the Seattle area in King County. Um, I don't have records of catching European chafer in our traps. And to be honest, it's not something that we've actually been keeping an eye out for. So I don't have any data points to
Yeah.
indicate if we have European chafer, unfortunately.
So you can reach out to Washington State University Extension to learn more
Hmm.
about European Shaper. They are working to update their European Shaper handout, hopefully have it available this summer for you. There's actually a great 6-minute video on European Shaper. So a lot of the master gardeners are going through some training or will be to kind of help answer and field some of those questions. But the university extension is going to be a great resource for anything European Shaper wise.
all right. Thank you. Next question, could you address any research on beetle deterrents, such as geraniums or milky spore, commonly seen on social media?
Yeah, hi Kim. Um, so the reason that we're using this product, acelepryn, and a lot of Western states also use it in their eradication, is it's probably one of the it has no signal word, which means it's probably it is one of the safest pesticides that we can use that actually is effective in eradicating Japanese beetle without impacting non-target species too much or at all. In that case, it's safe to use around pollinators, if you can believe that. Um, these other methods like milky spore, if you're looking for alternative methods to help control Japanese beetle, or kind of supplement the free treatments that we give through the program, WSU Extension is definitely the place to find further research and further reading on those methods.
Awesome. Camilo, too, I'll just chime in that a lot of the times if you see people starting to involve some other insects and things that typically leans towards control, we're not there yet. We're still focusing on eradication.
All right. Thank you. The next question, is there any information about the effectiveness of using beneficial nematodes to treat grubs?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Anonymous. Kind of related to the previous question, for alternative methods of control like nematodes, I would definitely consult WSU Extension. And as Cassie mentioned, we're still looking to really have this eradication be a success, and working with the public to eradicate using aceleprant at this point. And we're not really discussing other alternate methods of control at this point. So WSU is definitely your best bet on getting some more information on those things. Thanks for the
Yeah,
question.
a couple of things I can add too is if you look at some of our surrounding states like Oregon and Idaho, they all kind of use the same type of three-prong method towards eradication. Oregon is in like their 10th year and they're getting very, very close to crossing that success line. If you look at Idaho, they've used the same story and they actually have had eradication successes. So we're still kind of fueling on that momentum.
Thank you both. Okay, the next question, are there any volunteer opportunities to help with control and or eradication?
I can go ahead and field this. And if you want to get in contact with me, we can see if there's ways that we can work together to create maybe some type of cooperator opportunities where you're kind of involved and you know a lot and you have a lot of information and you can kind of help work to spread that to different communities and kind of get people involved. So definitely chances for you to be advocates in your community, whether you're living in a place with or without Japanese beetle, to really help influence residents and different people in Washington. So I will go ahead and post my specific contact information in the chat box, and I encourage anybody to go ahead and reach out.
Thanks, Cassie. Okay, the next question asked about farms, if they're being treated or if it's just residential treatments. If the farm is being treated, what precautions are in place for certified organic farms so they would not be treated with materials that would compromise the farm's organic status?
Yeah. Hi, David. Thanks for the question. To answer the first part, yes, it is just mainly residential properties. Now, it's interesting with the zoning parts of the parcel information that we get and that we work with to plan the eradication, because there are parcels that are zoned agricultural, but there is of course a residence on that property as well. So we are only treating residences in the sense that we're only treating turf grass areas that are ornamental. And so there's a lot of cases where there will be some cropland, but there will be a house on that property as well. So we would focus on treating the turf grass areas actually near the house, like a typical lawn area. And we would not be treating any larger pasture area with kind of mixed, wild grasses and possibly weeds and things like that, or, farm areas. The question disappeared for me to answer the second part. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Okay. Yeah. Organics. Yeah, that's a very good question as well. When we have situations where we find certified organic farms in the area, there are rules where you can keep that certification if you follow and observe, a certain buffer area for pesticide treatments. But in those individual cases, we do offer or we do plan on, offering an alternate product that can be used in those instances where a property wants to, or a farm wants to keep their certified organic status. but still help us eradicate Japanese beetles. So that is definitely on a case by case basis, and we have had those situations before. Um, and of course, we work with any resident and any small business that has that certified organic status. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Next question. Do male and female beetles have different appearances?
Hi, Kim. They certainly do. Um, in the in this the mass numbers that we catch them, with the naked eye, it is possible to see some differences. For example, females will be slightly larger. There are other differences as well, but you do really need a hand lens or a microscope to notice them. For example, um, on the front pair of legs, the males and females will differ in the structure of one certain segment of the front legs. One's more rounded while the other is sharper, and these are things that you would definitely need to look at closely under a microscope. But yes, there are definitely differences. But the one that you could notice possibly the most in your yard, if you have Japanese beetles in front of you, is just that size difference that I mentioned.
Okay. Thank you. We're getting lots of questions. Really appreciate it. We're going to do address questions for about 5 more minutes, and then we will wrap up and do the code word. All right. So next question. In ornamental containers, are the grubs observed to move similarly to black vine root weevil to the roots along container walls during late winter?
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. That's a really interesting question. And all I can say for in ornamental containers are to the roots along the container wall during late winter. I actually, I'm not sure. Um, and that would actually be something interesting to note. Um, but I don't actually have any insight on that. Um, I could get back to you with an answer. But I do know who I could ask for something like that. Um, but all I can say, if we want to piece this together, during the winter, not in a container, but in most cases where Japanese beetle is just in the soil generally, which is going to be most of them, they during the winter will burrow to about 6 to 8 inches underground. And people ask, does the frost get to them? When the ground freezes, and the answer is typically no. They will simply burrow deeper to avoid that frost line. Um, so potentially some inferences can be made there, but I don't have a sure answer for that question. I'm sorry at this point, but very good one. Thank you, Aaron.
Great. Thanks, Camilla. The next one, will acelepryn work on American oil beetles?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I had some weird glitching going on.
Oh, that's okay.
So the method that when we apply a acelepryn to the soil, um, the mode of action is going to be the the larvae of Japanese beetle need to actually the primary way that a acelepryn is going to act on them is they need to consume the roots of turf grass or other ornamentals that have absorbed the acelepryn. And if the larval stage of American oil beetles, I'm assuming I think if I remember correctly, that's the Malloy genus. I can't remember the species name. Um, I am not entirely sure what their larval stage does. Um, but if they had a larval stage, which I don't think they do, that consumes the roots of turf grass or ornamentals, then they shouldn't be affected at all by acelepryn, as they would actually never come in contact with it.
Yeah, one thing to mention too is if we are treating in an area, so I showed you this box before. Here, I'll actually go back to it because this might answer some questions about some other things, right? So, if we're treating in an area inside of this square for Japanese beetle. We're targeting that invasive pest. And, you know, we might lose one or two other things in that area, even though it is low risk and it's definitely targeting things. Another beetle going through the life cycle at the same stage, we might lose in that area. However, those native beetles are actually populating that area around the edge of that. So they will be able to go back and repopulate, whereas all of those invasive beetles will be wiped out. So just kind of a visual to go along with that answer.
Thanks so much, Cassie. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap up so that we are respectful of everyone's time and that we also have a chance to get everyone's license information. So I'm going to hand it back to Cassie for one final
Yeah.
wrap up statement, and then we will do the code word.
So the last thing that I have for you guys, again, look at this screen. I really like you to get on your phones and contact me. If you want to scan that QR code, you can go ahead and leave us program feedback, or a great way to get in touch. You can leave us your name and contact information, or even leave us anonymously. Whether you want to talk about how this webinar went, how you think the eradication's going, or just any kind of feedback in general for the program, we really appreciate it. We take it into account as we move forward and plan for the new years. So go ahead and scan that QR code, and back to you, Maria.
Thank you.